In a classic psychology experiment, researchers gave people a single instruction: whatever you do, do not think of a white bear. Immediately, everyone thought of a white bear. This is ironic process theory, the psychological principle that deliberately trying to suppress a thought makes it more prominent in your mind. If you tell yourself not to panic, your brain focuses on the word panic, and the command to suppress the emotion becomes the trigger for it. Stress fires when your brain makes a specific calculation. It evaluates the demands of a situation against the resources you have available. It happens when you believe you can no longer handle what is happening. This diagram shows the physical mechanics of that calculation. When the brain senses a threat it cannot manage, it reroutes energy away from the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for logic and problem solving. It hands control to the amygdala, an almond-shaped cluster of neurons that functions as an alarm system. At this point, higher-level thinking shuts down, and you begin reacting on instinct. Captain Sully Sullenberger faced this biological override when a flock of birds struck his aircraft, causing both engines to fail. With the plane dropping toward the river, he had 90 seconds to make a decision that would save 155 lives. Sully spoke into the intercom with a direct, professional voice, knowing that if he projected a tremble, the passengers and crew would mirror his fear and spiral into chaos. By regulating his own emotional temperature, he stabilized the cabin. Humans are biologically wired to mirror the physiological state of those around them, and his composure provided the baseline for everyone on board. Composure is a meticulously built sequence. It requires preparation before a crisis hits, discipline during the impact, and a structured response in the aftermath. In stressful situations, people instantly collapse the timeline between an external event and their internal reaction. A threat occurs, and the response follows immediately. High performers pull these nodes apart to create space one, the gap between what happens to you and how you respond. This psychological detachment is what allowed psychiatrist Viktor Frankl to survive the concentration camps. Even in total powerlessness, he realized he could still control the gap between the stimulus of the camp and his internal response to it. Space 2 is the gap between urgency and importance. High cortisol levels artificially compress your perception of time, making every single minor friction feel like an absolute emergency. Creating this space requires slowing down your reaction time to separate what is actually important from what simply feels urgent. Space 3 separates your identity from the outcome. A study from UCLA found that the brain processes social rejection and attacks on status using the same neural circuits as physical pain. If your ego is fused to the outcome of a conversation, your brain treats a disagreement like a physical wound. Building these 3 spaces beforehand stops the ego from treating everyday workplace friction as a life or death threat. Despite your preparation, the point of impact will still trigger a physical response. Your breathing becomes shallow, carbon dioxide builds up in your system, and your resting heart rate rapidly climbs. You cannot use logic to think your way out of this biological state. You can use a biological circuit breaker called the physiological sigh. By taking a double inhale through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth, you clear the carbon dioxide and force your nervous system to downshift into a stabilized baseline. Mike Tyson noted that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Once the sigh brings your brain back online, your success depends on what you do next. The first half of the CALM framework is to control the frame and absorb the hit. You control the frame by identifying the actual stakes of the moment. You absorb the hit by treating hostile behavior as raw data, viewing an angry outburst as simple sound waves rather than a verdict on your character. The second half is to lower the stakes and move decisively. Remind yourself that a workplace argument is not a personal threat. This allows you to execute one clear, unemotional action that forces the rest of the room to adapt to your composure. Combining a mechanical, biological reset point with a structured cognitive response turns a moment of vulnerability into a shift in power dynamics. These tools are necessary to navigate a modern landscape designed to destabilize us. Social media platforms optimize for rage, and the rapid advancement of AI creates a constant background of uncertainty regarding the future of work. During the 2008 financial crisis, The world witnessed the professional value of staying disciplined while others reacted on instinct. As markets crashed, the global financial system fell into a state of perpetual panic. Warren Buffett maintained his composure and famously wrote that bad news is an investor's best friend. Because he followed a structural sequence rather than biological impulse, he identified massive leverage and opportunity while others saw only catastrophe. The final obstacle to the system is the ego. When you feel triggered, you must ask what internal vulnerability you are trying to protect. Resilience comes from conquering the inner mind. By quieting the inner storm, you provide a point of stable ground for everyone else in the room.